Well, I never thought I would be back a few weeks later telling you about my 46-minute labor, but that is exactly what happened. Oh my word. What a whirlwind it was. There was so much beauty in it, and I can't wait to get into all the itty-bitty details of it for all you fellow birth lovers. But before we do that, I thought it would make more sense to first go over some of the health issues I've been dealing with in this pregnancy, because I know I kind of hinted towards that, and I did share some of it, but what I didn't share was that this was possibly the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. There were a lot of tears over the last 9 months, a lot of tears, and a lot of feeling just like this will never work. I am at my wit's end, just crying out to God for help and feeling like he was still silent. And so yeah, the last 9 months have been a big battle for me for numerous reasons, but I want to talk a little bit about the health issues just to give some context. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was equally excited and terrified, because with my previous pregnancy, I had debilitating morning sickness, actually ended up developing PTSD from it, and I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk hardly, like it was really bad. So when we found out, it was definitely mixed emotions, but I was always excited for like having the baby. Just the journey of getting there has been very difficult for me. So 6 weeks pregnant, I started bleeding and was scared I was losing the baby. We prayed over just protection for the baby and found out later that it was actually because of a UTI, they think, why I started bleeding. But then 6 weeks is also when morning sickness kicked in. So it came in strong again, lasted pretty similarly to my previous one. So around like 18, 20 weeks is when the nausea let up, and I was like, okay, now like maybe I can still have my active, healthy pregnancy for the second half. And I was feeling optimistic for a couple days that things were gonna be good now. However, that was quickly squashed by the hiatal hernia did come back again right around 18, 20 weeks, which, if you're not familiar with, is basically your stomach pushing up into your esophagus. So lots of stomach pain, especially after eating, and just, yeah, really miserable. Last time I was actually completely bedridden pretty much, or like on the couch the second half because of that. And so that was discouraging. But this time, on top of the hernia, I also found out around 20 weeks that I had pelvic floor dysfunction. So now not only was my stomach hurting really bad, but also I was having tons of pressure in my underparts and hardly able to walk. Like stairs were about impossible because of that. And so that was a whole thing. I went and saw a pelvic floor therapist, which was helpful, but it is something that I kind of continued to deal with throughout my pregnancy till about 35 weeks. I felt like it was about normal again. So there was that. And then also at my 20-week anatomy scan, baby looked beautiful, looked healthy, which biggest gift. But they did find that I had what they call an incompetent cervix. So basically my cervix was thinning too much for where I was at in my pregnancy, making me a big risk for preterm birth and all that goes with that. And so I had a number of follow-up ultrasounds to be checking on that. But that was another thing that like, you should probably like stay off your feet pretty much because of that. And so as you know, I ended up going a little bit overdue in the final end, but that was an added concern right around 20 weeks. So I was dealing with these three things, and it was somewhere between, I would say 20 and 25 weeks when in my just routine blood work found out that I had critically low ferritin, which is not exactly your iron, but it's your iron reserves. And so the concern was my hemoglobin was a little bit low, but the ferritin was what was the real concern, because if I were to bleed at any amount during birth, my body had nowhere to pull reserve from. And so that was a concern, especially with planning on a home birth. We were really trying to work on that. I took really strong iron supplements and actually found out then later they were hardly doing anything. Thankfully later we were able to figure something out, but I was having lots of weakness all the time and just feeling very off that way, and there was a couple things that they thought maybe was wrong. Nothing seemed to help. Iron was one of the things. Later found out it was actually coming from something completely different, but we'll get to that. So it was also around this time when I developed light sensitivity, and I am not entirely sure what this is from, other than I've had a lot of sinus issues this pregnancy. So a lot of time when I'm like blowing my nose all the time and it's bloody, just like pressure in my head. In fact, it was also around this time I look back now and I laugh because I thought now we're in the clear, and this is when like everything fell apart, it felt like. But I could no longer sleep in our bed at night because we have a good bed, I would say, but the bed was like, even on a stack of pillows, I felt like I was hanging upside down. So I had to sleep on our couch downstairs with my head like up on the armrest a lot, and that's where I slept for about half of my pregnancy. And so that was, I don't know, felt humiliating to me that I couldn't even sleep in my own bed with my husband. And Josh we'd often just like sleep on the sectional feet to feet throughout this time, but it was just like, this is not right. Like I can't even snuggle with my husband. But also this light sensitivity. I was having balance issues a lot, so I could no longer drive anywhere. Josh drove me everywhere. I wasn't able to be in church for the last probably few months because, again, with the light issues, the way our church is set up beautifully, but it has really tall ceilings, white walls, huge windows, and then of course the lighting. So all that light mixed with the white walls just really triggered that light sensitivity, and I would feel really off balance or dizzy in there, and so I couldn't do that anymore. Same thing with shopping, and so it basically completely isolated me, where I was so limited going anywhere, and when I went anywhere someone had to drive me there. So I became really lonely. I don't think I've ever felt as lonely as I did in this pregnancy, both from just all these things that it felt like, why are they happening? Like it's not usually, people don't deal with this when they're pregnant, and just doctors were having trouble figuring out why I kept feeling so incredibly weak all the time, all this stuff. And so yeah, I just felt very, very alone, and it felt like in every way, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, in every way, I was in my lowest low for these 9 months. So along with these other symptoms, I started getting a lot of anxiety, where basically if Josh was not at home, I would have a panic attack. I had to be where Josh was, and bless his heart, like he has been the glue to, I don't know, he's just carried so much, done so much of the housework, taken care of the kids. After he's done with his work outside and come in and cleaned up the kitchen, like just thing after thing, held me when I cried again and again, and he, yeah, has been the biggest blessing to me through all of this. That was another very debilitating factor, was the anxiety. So fast forward to about 30 weeks, I suffered a few gallstone attacks, and the last time actually ended up in the ER, which was New Year's Eve. It was the evening before New Year's Eve, and found out that then that these symptoms I was having was because of a gallstone attack, and actually found out then that that was what was making me feel so weak. I never knew the two could be connected, but all of my doctors and my midwife have confirmed since then that that is what's been going on. And I've since then noticed when my gallbladder flares up, that is when I feel really weak. So anyway, that's been interesting, but now we're carrying all of this up to labor and delivery, and I was terrified. I was like, I don't think I can give birth like this. Like, I can barely walk from one room to the next sometimes. I can't even go to church. I can't even sleep in my own bed. How am I gonna birth a baby? And it was really causing me a lot of fear, and just a time when I had to just keep praying and praying about it, that God would somehow work out the details. I kept praying that God would work out when and where and with who I had this baby, because all of that felt up in the air for a while. I was planning for a while to go back, rather do a hospital birth. Then after I had been there with my gallbladder, I felt like so uneasy about going back there for my birth. I don't know. It was a lot of stuff. And so I kept praying those things specifically, which is a little bit hilarious seeing how the birth actually happened. But fast forward then to the Monday before he was born. So I wake up with these pretty good contractions, and he's baby number 5. So like, I've been around the block a time or two. I was like, this is not just Braxton Hicks, like something's going on here, and was thinking maybe it was gonna be baby time. I am 2-3 days past my first due date. So this was the 12th, I believe, and having all these contractions, thinking maybe this is it. Till noon though, they were kind of phased out, and I was like, oh great, well, I guess that wasn't it. I had a midwife appointment that afternoon. She checked me and she's like, yeah, you're not dilated at all. You are 50% effaced, and baby is at a 0 station. So he is down low, but you're not dilated at all, which to me was a blow. I was like, what? For me, it's very normal to be 3-4 centimeters dilated until I ever actually go into labor for like 3 or so weeks ahead of time. Like, that's kind of been my trend with the other babies. And so I was very discouraged. Plus, she said baby is not in an ideal position. She said he's in ROT position, I think, which is basically they are on your right side facing in, and much more ideal is when they're on the left side facing in. So when they're on the right side, they can be born vaginally, but it's often a much like longer, harder labor, lots of back labor, that kind of thing. And so that was discouraging. I was like, great, now like I'm not feeling good all this time, whatever, now I probably will have an even more difficult birth. But I just kept praying about it. She gave me some exercises to do. I know it was like the inversion, what's that called? Somebody help me. But it was a series of like exercises, stretches, whatever, that is supposed to encourage the baby to move. It was, I think, from Spinning Baby's website. Anyways, I did that. I couldn't tell if anything changed. Like, I thought maybe I would feel like this big flip in my belly, which is what I felt when one of my babies was like feet down once. Anyway, it was like this big, like, look, you felt your whole belly move. There was nothing like that. And so I had no way of knowing if he had turned at all or not. And over the next few days, basically nothing happened. And I was just like, hey, I'll be pregnant forever. I just know it. I was terrified of going overdue because I know a couple people that have had stillbirths, and that's never been something I've dealt with. Like, I tend to go more on the early side. So I was scared. Friday morning rolls around, which is now February 16, and I wake up, same thing as Monday, felt identical. I woke up with contractions, just laying in bed there, having my devotions contracting. And one thing you have to know about me, I've always been a very strong-willed, determined person. And so I just told myself, Steph, it's the same thing as you had Monday. So don't get in your head about it and just get on with the day. So I'm laying there having my devotions, and y'all, I should have brought my devotional up. When I read this devotional, I was like, I wonder if today is the day, because it was like the first time in 9 months I heard God speak to me, and it was all about how God tests us for a season, but the time of rejoicing will come. And it said, maybe today is when that turns for you. And anyway, it was beautiful. It had all the scripture with it, and it just felt like God was speaking to me like, Steph, the trial is coming to an end, and I'm gonna pour out my blessings on you. And it was very, very precious to me. But I finished my devotions and got up for the day, got ready. I told Josh that I was having contractions, but like, don't worry, because I kept saying it's probably not doing anything. So we had family devotions and kids started school. I got my hands busy. My way of dealing with contractions always is just ignoring them. So I got my bread ready to bake. I'm working along. It was around 9:30, I would say, when I was like, wow, like these contractions hurt. But I still was just like, Josh was in the other room helping the kids with math, and I was just kind of leaning on things and trying to ignore this pain that was getting increasingly harder to ignore. And so about 45 minutes after that, around 10:15, I had just put my bread in the oven and I'm now sitting down to dehydrate banana chips. And I called Josh over and I was like, babe, can I just squeeze your arm? Because these really hurt. And his eyes got so big because he has memories of this. I did, and I was like, just so you know, it's probably not doing anything. And I still had this in my head that like, nothing's happening, just suck it up and move on with your day. And so he's like, no, I'm getting the birthing pool, because if you watched my previous video, you know I was planning on a water birth. So he runs out and blows up the birthing pool and comes back in, and in the meantime, like, things are progressing. And another sweet little thing was I had my worship playlist playing, but it was done playing and started just playing random songs. Well, the second thing that was just like such a precious confirmation to me from God was this song started playing I've never heard before in my life, but you should go look it up. You can find it on Spotify. It is by Sovereign Grace Music and it is called He Will Keep You. The most beautiful song. And in that moment, that was exactly what I needed. It was just like such a comfort to my soul that like God is for me and He's before me and behind me. It's on Psalm 121. So beautiful. And it just felt like those two things, the devotional and the song, were just like God's gift to me after 9 months of the darkest battle I have ever faced, and a lot that I haven't shared that I was going through mentally during this time as well. But it was such a balm to my soul, and I played that song over and over. Anyways, by this time I'm spending a lot of time on the toilet because that was the one place that was maybe a little bit relieving. Josh, finally, he's like, babe, you need to text your midwife, because I'm still in complete denial that anything's happening. And I was like, it's probably nothing. Like, I don't want to get her all worked up for nothing. He's like, you need to at least text her and tell her what is going on. And so I texted her and my text was basically, hey, I'm having contractions and Josh says I need to text you, but I don't know if it's any different than Monday. And she's like, okay, well, keep me posted. And so from there, and I keep glancing down because I did write all the times down because it is a flurry from here on out, okay? So that was at 10:54. At 11:13, I am now calling Christine. Hey, yo, you better like get over here. It's getting serious. I have moved over onto our bed. I was like trying to find some position. My car just got full and now my battery is dying. So I'm gonna try to keep this moving. I had moved onto our bed because I thought maybe this will give me a little bit of relief, and nothing was helping. I got my combs that so many people said were amazing. They were trash. They did not do anything. And so I am there having these strong contractions, and I call Christine and I'm like, this is not, like, I'm in labor, can you come, basically? And she's like, yeah, I'm actually 45 minutes away with a postpartum client, but she'll be over after that. And so at 11:17, everything goes haywire. Josh is trying to hook up the water to our wash machine, which is like a couple feet away from where I'm currently laying. And I'm like, babe, come over here, like just be with me. And he's at that moment realizes like, okay, we're not having a water birth, she's having a baby. The kids are still at home. So he's calling his mom to ask if she can get the kids. She's not at home, and so he calls his sister, who also lives just down the lane. She's like, yep, I'll be right there. Praise the Lord. So Josh gets a hold of her at 11:17. A minute later, I'm calling my midwife and I'm like, hey, I feel like I need to push. And she's like, how far apart are your contractions? And Josh had timed the last one and he said 4 minutes. So I said 4 minutes. She's like, you don't need to push at 4 minutes apart. You're just feeling lots of pressure. And I was like, I can't help it, like I'm starting to push. And I like hang up on her as another contraction comes on. At 11:25, my water breaks. I immediately start just bearing down and pushing. And I've never experienced the like fetal ejection reflex, but I think that's what this was. Like there was no, do I feel like pushing or not? Like I was just pushing and the baby was just coming. My sister-in-law got here just as my water breaks. So the kids are now out the door and Josh is there. Bless his heart. He stayed so calm, cool, and collected through all of this. I could tell he was a little bit like anxious, but he just was so calm for me. And I did not feel panicky in this time either. This is when I accepted I'm having a baby, was when my water broke. I was like, because that's usually my first sign of labor, right? And so I was like, oh, I'm having a baby. And I immediately start pushing. 11:34, he starts crowning. And so Josh is like, I see lots of hair. And to me, y'all, this was the third confirmation from God that he really cared and he really was there for me, because I had prayed through my pregnancy and I would even pray like, God, this is the least of my concerns, but if you could just send him with lots of hair, like just as a visible sign that you heard my prayers. That would just mean a lot to me. And so when Josh said, I see lots of hair, to me, it was like God saying, I've got this, you can do it. And so 2 minutes later at 11:36, our sweet little boy was born. Josh caught him. His head came out. He actually cried immediately before the rest of him was out, but he was very purple. Our midwife was on the phone with us this whole time because even the substitute midwife was not yet here. So she was talking him through it. She said to get me on my hands and knees. So he did that, and then the rest of him slid right out, and then he started pinking up right away. And he started crying, and y'all, it was the sweetest, most precious thing to me. It's Josh and I looking at each other with like these huge eyes like, what just happened? Like it was such a flurry. And I'm sitting on our bed, which we had moved downstairs into the den so we could be close to everything there. We're sitting in like right in front of the window. The sun is just streaming in on us. I have sweet baby boy on my chest, cord still attached. No one is there. It was one of the sweetest, like intimate moments ever, and so precious to me now. The midwife substitute gets there at 12, and of course by then baby's here for about 15-20 minutes, and we are just snuggling there. She was there for about 15 minutes before my actual midwife came, and yeah, things were so well. I hardly bled at all, which was another huge answer to prayer. And I actually brought this up because I want to show it to you. It's my second time now using this Reckless blood tonic. If you are expecting a baby, I would highly recommend it. Really, really good results with this to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. I must be long-winded because now my battery did die and I took out my bread from the oven, which reminded me, Josh actually, remember I was baking bread through this whole ordeal. Josh actually remembered somehow through all of this to open the stove door right before I'm like starting to push, and we had fresh bread to celebrate postpartum. But my midwife gets there around 12:15. Everything looks good. I am not bleeding, hardly at all. Placenta was still not birthed, and so that came out about 12:36. He nursed beautifully pretty much right after that. And yeah, it's been just such, the whole postpartum I was a little bit scared of just because through my pregnancy, it felt like thing after thing was going wrong, and postpartum has just felt like the exact opposite. Like things have been so much better than I ever expected. He was 9 pounds even, and so the fact that I did not even tear at all through such, well, I say at all, she said there was a tiny little like paper cut at some place, but it's not anywhere near where it affects anything. And so like I, since the beginning, have not felt like I gave birth down there. Like there has been hardly any pain at all, and I've bled very, very little. I am now, what, 10, 11 days postpartum, and the bleeding is just off and on. Like sometimes it's not at all, sometimes it's a little bit. A lot of that brain fog I've had, just so many things that have been such clear answers to prayer for postpartum, and things have gone so well. Sweet little boy is doing so well. Abby is here too. Say hi. She's getting ready for a nap, so I'm gonna need to go here soon. That is basically my birth story. I'm not quite sure for like what timing to call labor, but my midwife wrote it down as a 46-minute labor, which is, I guess, from when I texted her until he was born. So we are so incredibly grateful for that story after how difficult this pregnancy was. We named him William Shepherd and are so completely in love with him. He's such a content, sweet little baby. Oh, and I did want to mention too, I know on Instagram when I shared his name, lots of people were like, oh, we love his name, and had the sweetest comments, but there's a couple that were like, wait, there's another YouTuber that has a William, and so I thought I would just briefly mention that. Yes, there is. Delilah Lepke is her name, and she has beautiful content. You should check her out. She actually has a William Shepherd. There's someone else on Instagram that I also have really enjoyed her content. She also has a shepherd. I can't remember her name right now. Her handle, I think, is Her Home and Heritage. Anyway, she's a mom of a lot of little boys. It doesn't bother Josh and I if other people's kids have the same names, if it's not, you know, family or people that we know well. And so anyways, had people name their kids after our kids, and I think it's beautiful. Names aren't copyrighted. So anyways, that is William's birth story. We are so grateful to have him here. Thank you so much for all of you that prayed. I know there was hundreds of you that would comment saying you're praying for us, praying for a smooth birth. You sent messages, emails, and that truly meant the world to me in those, yeah, just really dark time in my own life. And then to see God's faithfulness through it all has been such a blessing and a good reminder for me. So we are on the other side now. I'm sure you will be seeing lots of little William in upcoming videos. I'll probably be baby wearing him a lot as we cook and all of that. So anyways, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, friends.
Golden, golden thing.